To webinar 5. Amazing. So my name's Simon Love. I was the founder of Restart Sailing and also the founder of Sail Racer, joined by John Emmett.
Hi, thanks very much for having me. Time seems to be moving on, so hopefully we get a bit more good news in the coming weeks.
So, well, we originally said three webinar, but I think still the three stage here, from the sort of aggressive self-gesting to the moderate self-gesture and the limited self-gesture. So, John, any feeling of where we are now in the process?
Yeah, well, I think we're getting to the point now where some clubs are going back to club racing. And I think for some people this has been a real relief, because I think sailing is actually a very good de-stressor for a lot of people. It's interesting times, and I would like to say that it's not always one solution fits everybody. And just because a different club has a different solution to you doesn't mean that they're right and you're wrong, or vice versa. So it's very much an individual thing, and clubs are proceeding at their own pace. And as I say, just because one solution's right doesn't mean another solution is wrong. And we're all sort of working our way through various guidance now, and things like I don't know, mask wearing in shops and things like that perhaps you would have expected to come in a long time ago. They're just coming in now, and I think we have a responsibility just to act in the best possible way. And I think as a sport, well, certainly for single-handed, sailing is perfect. I saw a great photo of somebody on a foiling single-hander the other day wearing a mask, and I thought, well, they're they're really on the side of super careful there. So I think a lot of the evidence will suggest most of the dangers are indoors, in unventilated areas. And sailing, especially if it's a bit windy, that's the most ventilated you can get, I think. So onwards and upwards.
So starting to go back to normal. I managed to get my hair cut, and although that took about 2 or 3 hours, and self-distancing. But I see, John, you've been busy sailing, I think, and not having a haircut.
Yeah, well, this was my first week back sailing, and I've got to admit I was absolutely broken. It was a bit embarrassing, really. I had a heart rate monitor on, and obviously my body's forgotten how to sail, or at least my mind's forgotten how to sail. I don't think I remember it being that hard. So I have done little bits of cycling and things during the lockdown, and my legs for hiking were relatively okay, but my arms and shoulders, God, crikey, it was hard to lift my pint at the end of the day. I mean, I don't think all the weight gain has been my hair. You can say I obviously hadn't had a haircut, but that's just my individual choice. I had a little look at the hairdressers in Weymouth, and they didn't seem to have any PPE at all. They had lots of people in the barber shops with very little social distancing, so it didn't seem a very good idea to me. Whereas I'm sure there's many places all around the country which are doing a really good job of cutting people's hair in a safe way. So
yeah, my experience was that they had the PPE, and they also had the booking in system and took your details. So a bit like the pubs. So I think obviously varies from establishment to establishment, but I think businesses are starting to get their heads around all this. But good to see some sailing started, and I think we had our first open meeting. We saw the Europes at Overy Stave Sailing Club.
Yeah, I think for the small classes or smaller classes, they've got a real advantage that maybe the initial numbers won't be a problem. I mean, that's one of the big things with larger events, is you would have a lot of people travelling, which we should still try and avoid. And for people to get accommodation and do all these sort of things, it's quite difficult. I mean, personally, I think it's been really good to encourage people just to be back sailing at their clubs. In regards to the haircut type thing, I'm middle-aged now, so I think it's not a big deal to me whether I look that smart or not.
Yeah.
The priority is getting back out on the water and doing these these things suddenly seem so much more important.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a resurgence in club sailing. So that picture at the top is West Kirby, and I think they had about 50 boats out there sailing on the Dee. Very tidal, but considerably more than they normally get. So they were pleased.
The guidance has been very confusing because we've had a sort of guidance for gatherings of 6 people, but a legal limit of 30, which seems a bit of a mixed message. But one of the things which has come out recently, and I want to thank Ian Walker for all his hard work here, is that actually on the water is not considered a gathering in that sense. So there's no limit to the number of boats you can race at a time, which to me makes perfect sense. I mean, if you end up within 1 metre of another person in a different boat, something's gone horribly wrong. But the pinch points are always going to be sort of launching recovery, or if we decide to meet in the changing rooms. So again, my view, I'm quite happy to not have a shower and not be able to go into the clubhouse, because maybe that's a safe thing to avoid, so that we can all go sailing and all get on the water at the same time. I mean, that for me, that really seems the important thing, just to let people get out. I see you've got a very good photo of some very PP'd up people in a rib, and you've got to commend that.
Yeah, so that was from the Europe meeting at Overstay, but obviously taking it seriously, and
well, good for them. Just good for them. I think what we have to do in the absence of racing, I think we should call the patrol boats rather than the safety boats, and I get myself in trouble. But in the absence of those support boats, by whatever name you want to call them, we probably do need to be a bit more careful. So perhaps club racing not in really extreme conditions. By that I mean really, really windy, so you might break something, or also really, really light, so it might be difficult for you to get back to shore if it happens to be tidal. And that's why I say, there's been a lot of discussion, and I think the group has been really good, just to let people talk and get the answers to their questions, get opinion. But just because some solution works for one club, it might not be appropriate for you, and vice versa. There's not sort of one size fits all. And it's nice. My social media now seems to have less people doing press ups and more people out on the water.
Yeah, and I think it's all, yes, you say, all about self resilience and being able to get that jury rig out and getting back to the basics. So we perhaps forgotten a bit.
Yeah, well, I said I think it's a great time for the slower single-handed boats, which are the grassroots of our sport, and just to get out is the priority. And double-handers will present its own problems because of the need to social distance, but then actually getting people to sail with people from their household, I think it's a great idea. Well, hopefully it's a great idea.
Yeah, no, great. And it looks like we're going to have about 150 yachts out with the jog race to the Nab Tower tomorrow. I think mainly double-handed or from the same sort of household, but again, some big numbers.
Well, I must admit, I've only I'm getting very soft in my own age. I've only looked in the weather forecast for Weymouth to see if it's going to be light winds and sunny for me to go out on the cycle, because I think a side point is the mineral zinc and the vitamin D are very important for your immune system. Getting out in the sunshine is a good thing. So it looks a nice day for a cycle tomorrow in Weymouth. That probably means it's still fairly light winds.
Yeah, it looks like we're under a big high, which may not generate the sea breezes or whatever. But interestingly, they had to postpone this race from about 2 or 3 weeks ago because it was too windy, and the concern was that because people hadn't been sailing recently, they'd be out of practice. And I think that's
they're right there. I mean, my tacking was shocking. We have a system at our club where we don't actually have a sort of formal club race. They just set up a course and you time your lap. And just for me, starting and stopping a stopwatch while sailing along was almost too difficult. I was just very glad I didn't capsize in front of everyone.
So some skills to be learned.
Skills to be remembered, I hope.
Skills to be remembered, yes. So really trying to take a view of the current situation. Really up to date. A few more sort of national championships being cancelled. round about, I think I would say it's about 86%, slightly up. So we heard this week about the toppers cancelling and the
And the
VX was.
420s just went. Is that true?
420s were, I think, announced
Yeah.
today. Some of the issues there are more really about things like accommodation rather than the actual sort of C19 of it. It's just the logistics of it.
I mean, the big championships always take a long time to organise, but it would be really frustrating as well if they hosted an event, but some people who wanted to do the event couldn't do the event because of the limit of numbers and the logistic. Who was just trying to find good accommodation. I did an airport run yesterday, and I was actually amazed with the amount of traffic on the road heading back towards the southwest with me. It felt quite normal, so to speak, and that was a bit of a worry. And it's just really mixed feelings because every time a championship is cancelled, I feel very sad, but at the same time I really understand the reasons, and I think for most it's a safe thing to do, and better safe than sorry. I think it's scuttlebutt. They use a picture of a skunk every time an event is cancelled, and I've seen him a lot on my news feed.
Yeah.
But I don't think the real die-hard sailors, the championships who normally do it, will, if they don't have it this year, will leave the sport. I would actually think it's likely we'll get the opposite, which when we can run championships, hopefully next year, that you'll see a real resurgence in people doing those events. I hope so. Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, and we're seeing a few classes back end of August, September, trying to get things in. So the RS Aeros announced this week about pushing ahead at Eastbourne. I think the Mustos at Brixton. And also heard from the Snipes trying to get their nationals off at Plymouth. Their obviously dilemma is double-handers.
Yes.
But,
much more difficult.
But we understand that there may be some news coming our way on that. There's been a lot of news this week.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of friends who work in the fitness injury. Sorry, is that a fraudulent slip? Fitness industry. In a previous life, I worked as a strength and conditioning coach for many years from Olympians from a variety of sports. And although I don't particularly miss the gym, as it were, I do really miss that sort of atmosphere and that training. And they've got a really hard time reopening. But you would expect when you start reopening these institutions where people are in close proximity, there could be a little uptick in the number of infections. So I really hope around September, October time we'll have a sweet spot, so the weather will still be good and we could do a little bit more racing. I think the thing always on the back of my mind is in the UK and probably most of Northern Europe, you've got that sort of November, December, which is the start of the virus season. So we probably have to be really careful at that point of time and not get over sort of get too relaxed, I think, overconfident.
Yes. Well, yes,
that's the danger now.
It's the back end of the year that could be the problem.
We still need to wash our hands, and it's very hard if you haven't seen someone for 3 months not to give them a hug. It's I found that quite hard.
And we're seeing some events sort of trying to adapt. I mean, we heard about Mersey Week being cancelled, but they're trying to get something off the ground, and I think we'll hear from Paul Jackson shortly on that. So an adapted event, more less formal, more flexible, and I think that's what we're seeing. The clubs are adapting.
Yeah, and I think I'm really excited about this event we're doing with the solos, because in a way that's an event that probably wouldn't have happened if we didn't have COVID-19. So there's always good things coming out of that. So I think we need to take advantage of the situation. It's certainly made me think about coaching. Just things like doing briefings before and after by Zoom and taking video and being really efficient with the contact time you have. I think that's a very good thing to take forward. And in terms of international stuff, it looks to me like Kiel will go ahead. And anyone who's thinking of doing it, you need to get your entry paid by the 15th of July or you're going to be losing your place in the queue. There'll be no training before. They're going to be, being absolutely rigorous disinfecting place, and it will only be a very short event and a very controlled event, but it is something that's going to happen. I must admit, looking ahead, I do worry a little bit for the lasers that the worlds are in the early part of next year, around sort of Texas. The USA seems to be in a bit of a worse situation than the UK, but of course, a lot can change in the coming months.
Yeah, so I think international is going to be hard. So lots of announcements this week, mainly the sort of the pubs opening and so forth, and interesting to see that 3 pubs sort of closed quite quickly, but they managed to deal with their sort of test and trace themselves, which got
I think that's the situation we could end up in sailing clubs. If sailing clubs, as in the actual building, if they open their doors, particularly those which have, for example, a bar or self-fit, you could end up with them having to do the open and close thing. So my worry would be that we just don't want to lose the sailing. I think we could deal without. People who know me will be very shocked to hear this. We possibly deal without having the pint of beer, but if we couldn't go sailing, we will be very disappointed. Although there is the joke that a lot of people were hoping that the pubs would open soon so they could cut down on their drinking, because alcohol sales went through the roof, I think, for the first 4 to 6 weeks of the lockdown.
Yeah, and I think some clubs are now starting to open the bars and the galleys and things like that, and basically following the guest list requirement and things like that. But,
yeah, I think it just depends on the location. I mean, if you've got a changing rooms and a restaurant type thing where people can come in one way, go out the other, keep their distance all the time, that's perfect. Some clubs won't really allow that. It depends about the number of people and the amount of space you've got. So that's why it's so hard, to have one size fits all. But I said that the really good thing is just everybody being back on the water, and I hope that's going to continue.
Yeah, and there's been a lot said about sport from DCMS this week. Almost an avalanche of new guidance coming out. But
it's good. The guidance now seems to be aligning a little bit better than it was before.
Yes, and there's been some shocking contradictions across the different departments, which obviously sailing falls into. DEFRA, Department of Transport, DCMS, and I think the RWA have been doing a good job to sort of try and rationalise that, so we don't.
It's just the way it is, and a lot of people were trying to do a lot of things very quickly. So I think where we are now, I think hopefully people are clear, and do feel free to ask any questions. We'll try and answer them on air. Then it will be recorded in the video, because the aim of this is to help people get back to sailing. It's exactly what it says on the tin.
And I think we are getting people back to sailing, so that's good stuff. So I think training without a coach, although the coach is still here, I guess.
Yeah, well, I must admit, I'm not trying to put myself out of a job, but I think you definitely can train without a coach. The thing I noticed, having had a long absence from sailing, is the fitness has just completely left me. Either that, or I used to think I was fit than I was. One of the two. And some people will have had COVID and will be coming back from a period of extreme fatigue, etc. So if we go back to that, I think fitness is a really good starting point. The previous talks with Restart Sailing, I've talked very much about the boat handling, and that's something which I think is almost a safety point of view, because you need to get that back up to scratch, and that's very appropriate for small and short course racing. I think now we can gradually increase the tuning runs and the lengths of races, so we can push the fitness a little bit more, spread things out, and just get this idea of working together. It doesn't have to be a formal squad system, but to actually go out at the same time as other people and sail against them. If nothing else, I think it makes it much more fun. I said at Castle Cove we were racing around the course without an official start, but actually just having other boats on the course definitely made it a lot more fun. And it's definitely easier, if that's not the wrong word, to hike hard or trapeze hard when you're comparing yourself to somebody else.
So it's interesting you were saying about your own fitness, John. I mean, you've been doing a lot of cycling, but you don't think that translates into sailing then, or?
Well, it didn't help my biceps. I think for me, I felt that cycling was one of the best ways to exercise and social distance. I mean, I'm so slow that any of the good cyclists, they disappear off into the distance, and I spend all my time just me and my bike. Anyone who goes past me is normally in a car with the windows shut. So I thought that was a really good way to exercise. And the thing that I did worry about was losing the ability to hike, because I think once I've lost that, I'm going to have to start a 2.4 campaign or something. So fortunately, that still seemed to work.
Yeah. Good. So moving on to the next slide.
Yeah, one of the things that I did with Lily before the 2012 Olympic Games, we reviewed a lot of past races. For people who don't know, she had a very bad injury, fell off a bike, broke a bone in her hand before the 2012 Games, and she had nearly 2 months off because of that. And during that, we spent a lot of time looking at past races and doing a lot of visualization. And I think that really helped her coming back into sailing. And obviously, this isn't quite the same. Hopefully, nobody has been injured. Although, if you have been injured, probably this is a good time to do it because you haven't missed much. But to go through and look at old races, I actually looked some of the really old America's Cup stuff, and in a way, I actually found it more exciting and more fun to watch than the modern stuff. And if you do have a coach, you do get that idea that you can train in a squad system, so the same people working together with a common goal. And that's not just elite sailing; it can be people who are literally learning to sail, just to be there in a group working together. But we can keep things a lot less formal than normal. I think that's probably one of the key messages. And that's, if you've got a coach there, that's something that doesn't have to be, work. It can be, just fun, people going out, and there's some support there if needed.
Good.
I've kept the first three words the same. I think this is a really good message from the RYA about think about a conservative approach. For some reason, these three words and simple messages work very well, whatever your stance is on Brexit, but take back control is obviously something that people are able to remember and resonated with a lot of people. So I think conservative approach is the message which we need here. And the most important thing is we're back on the water, and there's no rush for us to go back to what we were doing before, and we're lucky that actually outside is virtually, I've said always, that's a very strong word, but outside is virtually always safer than inside. So once you're actually out on the water, everything is good. It's just trying to be careful getting there. And I hope with the rush to restart racing, people just remember all the important lessons we've learned over the past few weeks.
Yeah, very good. Right. So
coming up 19th.
Yeah. So we currently have about 25 clubs who are sort of signed up for this, and this is sort of about really being your own race officer, interestingly. So they're all doing their own sort of practice races, and it's really actually the sailor almost being the race officer, so setting the course.
I was just wondering, James might actually get some sort of record for being the PRO responsible for the most race courses ever. If he's got 25 or 30 or whatever. I don't know if there's a record out there, but I guess so. I guess something for CV.
Even things like Kiel Week is only about 5 or 6 courses, isn't it? So,
exactly. It's massive. And the clubs, I really encourage them to get in contact with me, because actually I would love, if at all possible, to speak to like one person from every club. I'm sure that won't be possible, but we would like to do our best just to talk to all the personalities and see what's going on. And that's one of the beauties. I don't know how accurate the chart is, but we've got a huge spread of sailing clubs from
from sort of
south and east to west.
And coastal and inland. So we had as John will know, an online briefing with the clubs, or the race officers, as we're now going to call them, and that went well. And we'll have a sailor briefing next week, and then everything goes live next week following from that. So that sounds good. And then that leads into a sort of regatta at the end of the month, sort of following the same sort of principles. So all really exploring new sort of new formats and new areas.
And as I say, post-COVID times, whether that's one week or 1 month or 1 year or however long, I see no reason why these sort of events can't happen. I think it's a great idea. And I was doing a little bit of racing, not actually with the specific apps, but just using my watch and my heart rate monitor. And of course, it showed the track I sailed. and I thought that was quite interesting. It's something I've never done before.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's
basis.
exciting. This technology's actually been around with all of us, and we've all got it somewhere. And it's just a matter of bringing it together and making use. So I think we're going to see these new sort of formats emerging, not replacing anything, but just giving some alternatives and
yeah, exactly.
Actually, quite exciting times. Yeah. Right. Okay. Haven't seen any sort of questions. So.
Yeah, well, I think there's a really good chance of there being some more news coming next week. So if we can try and put together a show, as information comes in, because unfortunately, it's not always clear as it could be, and I think we can probably help people out with that.
Yeah. So, well, the plan was to be looking at 2 weeks' time, but we'll keep flexible. If anything really radical happens in the next week.
Yeah, well, I think the government obviously have changed their timings for some of the announcements because it's a fluid situation. And, I think that's a really sensible thing to move announcements forward or back depending on, what they're seeing. And, it is what it is.
Yeah, and it seems to have been a bit of an avalanche this week. I think, like with the announcement of billions going into the theatres and arts, well deserved.
Yeah, without going off topic, it does seem that you sort of have to shame the government a little bit, and then they do the right thing. Whether it's
we had the thing with the
deals
school,
for people or whatever.
Yeah, the Marcus Rashford and school dinners and things like that. So
that's just what I was thinking. Yeah.
So who knows what's going to be shamed next week? But
RAA can keep up the pressure, saying what a wonderful sport we are.
Yeah, and I think the message getting through that recreation and health is very important, and
mental health as well as physical. That's something I would really stress, because I think sailing actually fits both bills really well. In fact, it's one of the only times I actually switch off and get away from my phone and computer and everything else is when I'm racing.
Yes, and there's been a lot of discussion about mental health, particularly as we're going now into very uncertain times, I think, with people's employment and finances. So a lot of people are going for escapism, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think that's why people are always looking for solutions and sort of arguing that their answer is the right answer. Whereas, in fact, there's lots of solutions, lots of answers which are right for different people. And I think that the clubs, it's a hard time. If you volunteered to be a sailing secretary 12 months ago, you wouldn't realise what you were going to be doing this year, that's for sure.
Yes, and credit to the clubs, they've sort of taken this seriously, and they've sort of got the COVID teams as been recommended, and generally working through it and coming up with solutions, which in the past would have taken them years to get through. They're now getting through them literally in days, which is very impressive, the speed and rapid response of different organisations.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, I hope people find this useful. We'll try and bring in the next one.
Yeah, and perhaps have some guests. Okay, thank you very much. Over and out.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay.